Hello everyone, my name is Ian, you're watching Big Rock Moto, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Over the past several months, I've been asking you what questions do you have on this new Norden 901. I started asking for questions even before I took delivery of the bike, but I've been continuing to ask you to send in your questions, and what I've been doing is I've compiled all of the most important and best questions here, and we're going to cover them in the sit-down discussion today. So because I live high in the mountains and because it's winter time, my riding has been a little bit limited. I think I have around 500 miles on the bike, so keep that in mind as I answer some of these questions. This is not a long-term ownership review. This is an initial impressions sort of viewpoint as I go through and answer these questions for you. Now, as we get into spring and summer, I have a lot of exciting trips planned for this bike and a lot of more exciting content planned for the Norden, so please stay tuned for all that. And as you can hopefully see in this video here right now, I'm trying to also bring up the level of my production quality, and I have a few more surprises in store for you over the coming months. Okay, so I am going to go in and answer a lot of the specific questions that individuals sent in, but there were a few questions that I got so repeatedly, I'm just going to group those into these general questions and address those now. So one of the first things that has come up is how much does the bike weigh? So Rottweiler Performance in Orange County, California, great guys and gals over there, they actually put the Norden on a scale, on a very accurate scale, and measured the bike. And it came in at 472 pounds. I'll put the metric conversion down here below in kilograms. But at 472 pounds, fully fueled, by the way, that's a fully wet weight, it's only about 3 or 4 pounds heavier than KTM's 890 Adventure R. That was very, very good news and very, very surprisingly good news because we thought it might be maybe 10 to 20 pounds heavier based on some of the early specifications we got when Husqvarna released the specs of the bike. But good surprise there on the weight, and I think that does make sense because the plastic fairings, I've actually taken them off, and I do have a video coming about that kind of stuff, but they're very, very thin and light. They don't add much weight. Other than that, I mean, maybe the seat's different, the headlight's different, but a lot of the bike is really the same, so it kind of makes sense that the bike doesn't weigh too much more. There's also been a big group of questions kind of about how is it to lift, how does it fall over, what is the crash damage, do you need crash bars, how does it compare to the KTM 790 and 890 and things like that. So I did a video on this, however, I did admit in the comment in that video, which I pinned, that I did not do a very good job in that video because I didn't show the handlebars turned, and it also wasn't really like a full crash situation. Now, keep in mind, I'm really not going to go crash the bike at high speed just to make a video because that's not the type of YouTuber that I am, and I don't want to do that to the bike. But as we go on and put more miles on a bike, I will report back on more severe types of accidents if those do occur. However, there is somebody over on Adventure Rider, and I'll put the photos here. He did crash the bike at maybe 10, 15, 20 miles an hour, and the upper fairings, the upper plastic pieces did get pretty scratched up, and as well as the lower plastic fuel tank guard there. So do you need crash bars? That's really up to you. The damage on that individual's bike was purely cosmetic, so if you want to prevent that, you could use crash bars. But I think mechanically speaking, the motorcycle will be pretty durable, just as the 890s and 790s have proven to be. I also get a ton of questions about reliability. Now, reliability is very, very hard to talk about because it's very hard to quantify, it's very hard to measure, and everybody has kind of their loyalties and their opinions on what they've heard from their friends. And it's just a very difficult thing to discuss. People go to the internet to report problems, right? They go to talk about problems, the Facebook groups, the internet forums. People come there because they have some issue that they want to solve. So problems are magnified, and it's really difficult to tell if one motorcycle brand is more reliable than another motorcycle brand, or one model is more reliable than another model. There's just a lot that goes into that. So for that reason, I really can't speak much to reliability, other than what I can say is that there might have some quality control issues right now, because on my bike, it's been leaking coolant since day one. So it drips coolant on the ground, and I found out from the forums and social media groups that what it is the hose clamps from the radiator going into the engine are not tight at the engine side, and I'm probably going to have to pull off a few pieces to be able to get a screwdriver on those hose clamps and tighten them up. So it's a relatively simple fix, but it's not necessarily easy to get to, and it's just a shame that they would overlook something like that on a motorcycle like this. So now let's get into the specific questions that I've picked out. Now, please don't be offended if I skipped over a question or didn't include it. There's a couple reasons why that might be. One, maybe we've covered that in the 5 or 6 previous episodes I've done on the bike already, and so it already got answered. Or two, maybe it just was something that I missed because I have so many questions coming in, probably thousands of different comments a week, so it's hard for me to keep up with that. So I do apologize. If I do miss your question, please put it down below and I'll answer it in the comment section on this video. So Yeti Rider 650 asks, how does it do on any sweet jump? So I haven't taken it off any sweet jumps yet, but I will do that and I'll report back on that very soon. Tristan. OTS says, what are the pros and cons compared to the 890 Adventure and Adventure R? So the differences between the Husqvarna Norden 901 and the KTM 890 Adventure R, we've kind of touched on this in some of the videos. Essentially, the Norden has differences in styling, it has a different seat, a different windshield and fairing setup, and it has a different suspension. So the suspension on the Norden is halfway between the standard KTM 890 and the 890 Adventure R, which I think is a good compromise for most people. The Norden has a little bit better wind protection, but it still does have quite a bit of wind buffeting, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Obviously, you've got the differences in styling, the different headlight. The Norden is a little bit better value, in my opinion, because you're getting more standard equipment, and I had a chart about this in one of my previous videos that I put out. So you're going to really have to choose. I mean, if you're a super aggressive, hard-charging off-road rider, then just get the KTM 890 Adventure R. That decision should be easy because the suspension on the bike is so much better. But if you're not a super aggressive off-road rider and you don't need to go to the 890R, then the Norden I think is a really good choice as compared to like the standard 890 or a lot of other adventure bikes because of the low center of gravity, the high-performing engine, the lightweight, it's the lightest in the class, and it just has a lot of great attributes to it. So Sotex Dobie says, is it wider than an 890? It's really the same bike, so it's not wider. It just appears to be wider because it has the more fairing on the top. But the handlebars are, you've got handlebars, you've got your luggage, and you've got the fuel tanks down low. All of that is about the same as an 890. So no, it's not really technically wider than an 890. Ty Basco says, how is the wind noise on this thing? Although I love my 790 Adventure, the wind noise really drives me nuts. Any improvements with the Norden 901? So I was hoping to be able to say that it's way better, but it's only a little bit better. So I've used to have a 790 Adventure R, and my biggest complaint with that bike was the wind buffeting. Now I was able to solve that on my bike by taking off the side winglets. So if you're listening, take off those side winglets, the little plastic pieces, I'll put a photo here, and fit maybe a different windscreen, either put a visor on the stock one or fit a taller windshield, and I think you'll solve most of your buffeting issues with the 790 or the 890. The Norden has more wind protection for your body, but it still dumps a lot of noisy air on your helmet, depending on what helmet you wear. So it's a little bit better, but unfortunately not as much as it should be since they're trying to tout this as like a long distance bike. Devil Dog 53, has the windshield spoiler helped? So I'm trying out a couple different spoilers right now. I tried the larger one that I took off my GSA. Now I have the medium one here you can see on it. And it does help a little bit, but not as much as it does on other bikes. And I don't know why that is. But stay tuned on that because I have further experimentation. Also, I'll be the first to try any aftermarket windshields to come out. So any sort of aftermarket ones that are out there, I'm going to order them right away and test them out and report back. Vladimir FR says, is it more comfortable for highway than an 890 Adventure? It is from the factory, and here's why. The seat is more comfortable and it has a bit better wind protection. So those two things do make it more comfortable, but it's the same engine, it's the same chassis. The suspension difference is, so it's more plush than the 890R, but I think it's a little bit firmer than the standard 890, although I haven't spent much time on the standard 890. So I hope that helps answer your question. Yeah, it's a little bit better for touring than the KTM. Stu Mumford says, can you use the skid plate to strain spaghetti? So you know what, I'm going to do that test for you, Stu. Just wait for a couple more videos because when I take the stock skid plate off to change the oil and put on an aftermarket skid plate, I will put some spaghetti through it. I think we'll have a nice spaghetti dinner and we'll find out if that works. World ADV Bike Rider says, how much plastic is on the bike? So the only additional plastic versus like the KTMs is the upper side fairing pieces, and I'll put a little video clip of that here. It's not very much, but it is something that is going to get scratched up and damaged in like a severe crash or, you know, sliding along the dirt or the asphalt. So it is one more thing you'd have to repair. But I think if you had a crash like that on a KTM or the 890 or whatever, you're still going to have some damage of something. So it's not a huge deal, and I don't think it should really make your buying decision go either way. Dave 911 RSR says, motor torque at low RPM, is the skid plate effective? The motor has quite a bit of torque. You know, it's 900 cc. They really improved this from the 790 engine. It doesn't have the kind of torque that you would get out of, you know, like a R1250 GS or KTM's larger 1290. But it's similar to like a Tiger 900. It's going to be more than something like an F850 GS. So it's a good amount of torque and has plenty of low-end grunt for any kind of riding, street or off-road. Vison B says, ergos compared to the Africa Twin and the GS, is it cramped? It's not cramped. The ergonomics are very relaxed, very roomy, and I would say maybe slightly more comfortable than the average adventure bike, just a little bit more room than the average bike. So if you're looking at something like an Africa Twin or a GS, it's going to be very, very comparable to that. Now, I did fit a lower foot peg on my bike, which we'll talk about in an upcoming episode, just to get a little bit more leg room, but I do that on most of my bikes. Ricardo LM says, hi, congrats on your new bike. My doubt is I am 5.5 height, 28 inseam. So is there something I can do to lower the Norden 901 or there's some aftermarket devices? So there's a couple things you can do to lower it, but at 5'6", I think you said, and 28 inch inseam, that's going to be pretty challenging on this bike. So they do have a lowered suspension kit, which you can buy from Husqvarna, and you can also get a lower seat either through Husky or through the aftermarket. And you might be able to drop things a couple inches, but I would recommend going to sit on the bike and trying to figure out if that was an inch or two lower, is that going to be enough, or is it just way out of bounds for you? You might have to look at some motorcycles just with the lower seat height, unfortunately. Havasu on the Lake has a bunch of questions. So weight, we already talked about. Price, we already talked about. Warranty is 2 years, at least in the USA. Oil change interval is 6,000 miles per the service manual, but I will not be going that long. GPS and TFT. Well, there's no GPS built in, but you can mount your GPS. They have a mounting location up above the screen. The TFT is pretty large, pretty bright, pretty legible. I've covered that and I really like it. Tires, it comes with the Pirelli Rally Scorpion STRs, and they're a good tire for like maybe 70-30 riding, like 70% street, 30% dirt. But if you want to get more aggressive in the dirt, you're going to want a knobbier tire than that. Gas tank center of gravity compared to the KTM. I can't notice any difference. It feels the same to me. And when you look at the design of the tank, it's pretty much the same design fuel tank, so I don't think there's much difference there. Dirt versus street capability, i.e. KTM 890R versus Tiger 900. Thanks for the in-depth reviews. Bikes look amazing. So I would say this is like the perfect 50-50 bike in terms of dirt versus street capability. I think if you look at something like a Tiger 900 or an F850 GS or something like that, it ups the game a little bit on the street and the dirt compared to both those bikes. So it's a little bit better in both areas. Compared to the KTM 890, so the 890 Adventure R is the king of the off-road adventure bikes. It just dominates everything else because of the suspension. So it's not going to be as good as that. But other than the 890R, I think it's probably the second best mid-size adventure bike for off-road riding. Peter Krajnik says, hi, I'm a big fan of your work. Greetings from Germany, Black Forest. How does it compare to the Tiger 900 Rally Pro? Triumph is good on and off-road. Could the engine be a game changer to swap? Reliability issues kept me away from buying KTM. Excellent work on your videos. Thank you, Peter. So we talked about comparisons to the Tiger. I think that the Norden it gives up a little bit of comfort on the highway compared to the Tiger, but it's more fun to ride. It's lighter and more flickable and faster, more powerful than the Tiger. So that's kind of a mixed bag on the street. And then off-road, it's way better than the Tiger, like by far. Because of the low center of gravity, I think the suspension is better. It just handles better. So I hope that answers your question. Reliability, it's hard to talk about that. So yeah, thanks for your question. Janie Sir says, I consider this model for travel. Is the engine jerky and handling at low speeds? Number one, the engine is not jerky in my opinion. Handling at low speeds is excellent. the best of any adventure bike other than its cousin, the KTM 890 Adventure. Matthew Kopp says, yeah, I have a very important question. Can I have it, please? No, you cannot have this one, sorry. But you can go buy your own. Marnie and Rich Aaron says, good looking bike. Looking forward to hear your thoughts on how it compares to the T7 and the Africa Twin. So I'm going to have to do a video. Well, first of all, hi guys. It's good to hear from you. These are friends that I know in real life. So how it compares, I'm going to have to do a whole video dedicated to that because there's so much I want to talk about. But in summary, I will say that as a bike that does off-road and on-road, it raises the bar very, very high and is very, very tough to compete with. Okay, this is a name with characters that I can't read, so sorry about that. But he has a few questions. He says, lifting up test, comparison of the middle and big adventure bikes. So in terms of lifting it up, it's one of the easiest adventure bikes to lift because it has that low center of gravity. I can't really think of anything that's easier to lift. I mean, sometimes the GS with the boxer engine can be easier because it doesn't tend to tip over very far. But the Norden is one of the easiest bikes to lift in my experience. Torque on low revs and minimal speed with no clutch helping. So I did show that, I think, in my first ride video. Recommended rider height and options for low riders. So we've already talked about the options for shorter riders. The optimal height, I mean, I think you need to be like, unfortunately with a bike like this, it's a 33 to 34.5 inch seat height. If you're under 5'8", it's going to be pretty tall, but so is just about every other full-size and mid-size adventure bike. Vulnerable crash points while falling. We talked about that. It's that upper fairing plastic can get scratched up. Of course, your handlebars always take a beating, so get metal handguards. And then those lower tank guards are going to get scratched up and dented up. They're replaceable. They're not very expensive. Or if you wanted, you could fit some crash bars. Front lighting equipment, I showed that in my other videos, works very well. Real fuel consumption. So we haven't covered fuel consumption yet. Minimal and at 90 miles per hour. I don't know if he means miles per hour or kph. But the fuel consumption I've been averaging 55 US miles per gallon. I can convert that here in the text. I think that's very, very good fuel economy for an engine of this size with this much power and this large of a bike. And that's with the panniers you see on this. So I'm pretty impressed by that. And then he also asked about reliability, which it's impossible to really talk about. Rebel Canuck, thank you so much for your support. You're always commenting, and I believe you're a Patreon as well. It says, I saw one yesterday, seat looks comfy but too wide at the front. I've heard people complaining that the suspension was too compromised and is the TFT too small and too far away. The suspension, I think, is actually a really good compromise between off-road and on-road, one of the best setups that I've been riding lately. The TFT, I think, is just big enough. I wish it was maybe in like an inch bigger. That'd be perfect. But hey, I know you get the backlit controls, right? And that's something we're always complaining about on our GSs. So let's see. You say the bike has potential to be a massive hit. With its weight, its lineage, I just can't get past the styling of the single giant eyeball of a headlight, the Eye of Sauron. Yeah, the styling is a bit polarizing. I think most people seem to like it and some people don't, but you know, that's totally subjective, to each his own. Less Death 69 says, do reliability issues with display, brakes, clutch, and rear shock appear to have been addressed with the design changes? Yeah, that's a tough one. I think they did change some components, like the suspension is different, the dashboard is different, the TFT is different, so I don't know if that means you're not going to have the water intrusion anymore like you did. We'll have to wait and see what happens with the owners of the Norden. I haven't heard anyone with those issues yet. The brakes are the same, so hopefully we don't see those issues that some of the 790s and 890s saw. The clutch, I think they did change some things with the clutch, so that might be okay. The rear shock, we don't know, but the suspension is different. I am hoping that as this platform has more time to get more evolved, that they do kind of iron out some of these little issues. Roland Cooper says, I would like to know 3 things about this bike. First, the actual wet weight, so we already covered that. Second, compared to your T7, is the Norden more difficult to lift from a complete side down? No, it's much easier to lift than the Tenere 700. It feels like a much lighter bike to lift it. It also feels like a much lighter bike when you're riding it, pushing it around in any situation. Third, your actual cost of the bike out the door. So I covered that in my first video, so go and watch that. Ken Ferguson said, is it the middle bike between too small and too large? I think it is, but I also think that the KTM 790 and 890 Adventures are the same idea there. And in some ways, you know, the Tenere 700 and the Tiger 900 and bikes like that. Although for overall capability, if you put reliability concerns aside and some of the little refinement issues, this platform is the most capable and sort of most unicorn size adventure bike or multi-cylinder adventure bike. That's just my opinion, based on having ridden just about everything lately. But I think it's the most capable and the most right size adventure bike for doing actual like long distance street miles and still doing pretty difficult off-roading. Whereas something like a 1250 GS is really too big off-road, like I showed in my videos. When something like, you know, some of the smaller single-cylinder bikes just don't do well on the highway. So I think this kind of size, at least where I live in the USA for the riding I do, is perfect. Emmanuel Grazioli says, suitable for a first adventure bike for a rider with zero experience. I would say no. It's big, heavy, and powerful. Get something smaller, lighter, and with less power and with a lower seat. AF06 says, how is it different from the KTM sibling and the cost of ownership? We've covered the KTM stuff to death, kind of. Cost of ownership, we'll have to have separate videos on that because that gets really detailed, but it's your basic motorcycle stuff. Nothing complicated, easy oil change, easy air filter changes. Valve checks are 16,000 miles. I don't know how much that's going to cost, but you can do it yourself if you want. So I think it's just going to be like running any motorcycle. You do have chains and sprockets. Tires, you know, depending on what kind of tires you use, how often they wear out. So just the normal stuff. Peter Los Angelos says, what are the differences in fully configurable control, ABS, etc., with regard to 890 Rally R? Also, I like it to be judged off-road competitors with proper tires. Yeah, so I will be testing it with proper tires coming soon. The differences in the electronics, there are no differences actually. You have the same level of control you do with the KTMs. On KTM, they call it a rally pack you have to unlock in the software. On the Husky, they call it the Explorer pack. It does the same thing. 9-level traction control, configurable ABS, configurable ride modes, configurable throttle response. Comprehensive, works well, and is some of the best in the motorcycle industry. So Peter Los Angeles has one more question. He says, wind weather protection compared to other bikes like the 850 GS and the Tiger 900 Rally. So the weather protection on the Norden is better than some of the more like narrow adventure bikes like the standard F850 GS. The Tiger 900 has less lower body protection, but it has a better windshield. It has an adjustable windshield. It has that vent, so there's less buffeting. So I would say the Tiger 900 is a little bit better compared to an F850 GS, so it's better than the standard 850 GS, but not as good as the F850 GS Adventure with the larger tank and kind of the plastic fairings. Also, that bike has an adjustable windshield. I'm actually looking at that bike right now in my garage. So it's not as good as some of the larger adventure bikes, but for a mid-sized bike, I think the weather protection is pretty good. I just wish the windshield was a little bit quieter. Jacob K says, how is the engine heat? Is it too much for a rider? So I haven't noticed any engine heat yet, but it is winter, so keep that in mind. As we get into the summer months, I'll report back on any sort of engine heat that I experience. Crawl Talk Run says, is this an updated or better version of the KTM 990? No, I don't think so. It's very hard to compare anything to that bike. That bike was such a legend. I mean, the engine sounded so amazing and the styling was so cool on that bike. This is an overall better bike almost in every way. I mean, it's lighter, it handles better, it's more agile, the suspension's pretty good, it's more comfortable, it's easier to work on, gets better fuel economy, has a longer fuel range. So a lot of those things are there, but if you really want that V-twin sound and that V-twin character, then you're sticking to, you know, KTM 1090 or KTM 1290 or something like that. Martin Cezanda says, what I'm curious about is the handling, especially if it's closer to the Tiger 800 or 890 Adventure, or maybe a bigger bike like the Africa Twin. So here's how I would characterize the handling. If you look at all the mid-size adventure bikes, this bike and the KTM sibling, the 890, are the best for handling. The low center of gravity is a game changer. It handles so much better than the other mid-size bikes. It's not going to be as agile as like a dual sport bike like a KTM 690 or a 500 EXC, obviously. But it's going to be also a lot more agile and flickable and more fun to ride than like a 1250 GS or Super Tenere or V-Strom 1050 or any of those larger bikes. It's going to be better handling, more fun than that. Colin Mai says, what is the fuel range on a single tank of gas and comfort for long rides? So the range on a single tank will be around 200 to 250 miles. I get 55 miles a gallon. So if you do the math, it's going to be in that 250 mile range. The comfort is really good. The seat's comfortable. The ergonomics are good. I just wish that it had a little bit quieter windshield. So Andres G says, how capable is it off-road? I think it's very, very capable off-road, and we've kind of covered that. For an adventure bike, for a multi-cylinder adventure bike, it's very capable. Mark Rhino says, is it worth the extra over a smaller bike like the CB500X, the V-Strom 650, or the Tenere 700? If you can afford it, I do think that it is, because it unlocks quite a bit more performance envelope, performance capability. The technology's better, it's faster, has better brakes, has more ground clearance, has better suspension, it has cruise control, has rider aids. It's got a lot of the stuff that you might spend money trying to upgrade those other bikes to, or you could just get a more expensive bike. So I don't know, I'm a fan of it. I like this platform. Some of those bikes you mentioned, people are very loyal to, like the Tenere 700 and the V-Stroms. They're amazing motorcycles, and you can't beat the Japanese reliability and the Japanese quality. But the performance of this 901 or its KTM siblings, you just can't deny it. Ermini Gill 69 says, I've read it feels more top-heavy than a KTM 890 Adventure R. How does it compare to an Africa Twin? How's the wind protection? And then he talks about his getting rid of his 1190 to get one. Does it feel more top-heavy than the 890 Adventure? No, in my opinion, it doesn't. I can't tell any difference versus the 790 or the 890. How does it compare to an Africa Twin? I don't know if you're asking about the top heaviness or the performance. It feels way lighter than an Africa Twin. It's way better off-road than an Africa Twin. On the street, it's more fun to ride because it's lighter, more agile, it has more power. But the Africa Twin just has that Honda quality and longevity that is very attractive for a lot of people. Compared to your KTM 1190 that you're asking about, that's a tough one. The 1190 is a whole different class of bike. That's like the full-size adventure bike, whereas this is a mid-size bike. So the 1190, you get the V-twin engine, you have a lot of power, but if you step down to the smaller platform, either an 890 KTM or this bike, you're getting the agility, the lower weight, it's more fun to ride, it's easier to ride off-road, so you just have to make a trade-off there. Florida Native says, can you throw this around on a single track, or is this another half-capable fire road cruiser with limited off-road capability? So I'm looking at my GS right here in the garage, and I'm just having kind of a chuckle about the fire road cruiser thing, which is totally true for some bikes. So it's legit. This platform, we beat this to death. It's so legitimate off-road. Put some good crash protection on it, put a good set of knobby tires, and tear it up. This platform is proven to be the most capable, multi-cylinder adventure bike ever produced. And I fully agree with that, with whatever all the other journalists and all the other reviewers have said. So it's very capable off-road. It's not just a fire road cruiser, although you can use it like that if you want, and that's fine. But if you want to get more aggressive, you absolutely can. Although I would say, if you want the absolute max off-road potential, just get the 890 Adventure R, because you get the better suspension. So I hope this was a useful video. I hope you learned something. If I missed your question, or if you have additional questions, please put that below in the comments, and I will get to those and reply to those in the comments section below. Otherwise, I just want to thank you for watching. Please support this channel. This is my full-time job. Please support me by purchasing from REVZILLA in Rocky Mountain, leaving a comment, giving a thumbs up, becoming a Patreon supporter. All the things I list below in the description really helps me out. I truly appreciate it. Other than that, thank you for watching. Please stay tuned for more Norden videos, a lot more coming soon. But besides that, we'll see you out there.